Snow was supposed to hide danger, but on that brutal Montana morning, it exposed everything. When 45-year-old Elias Ward found his 18-year-old niece Mira collapsed in the blizzard behind her school, her lips blue body shaking, he thought it was a tragic accident. Until his German shepherd Orion froze, ears raised, staring at the locked door just inches away, a door someone had shut on purpose. As Mira whispered the name of the teacher who forced her outside, and Orion tracked a scent tied to a criminal Elias thought was long gone. One truth became undeniable: this wasn't punishment, someone wanted Mira silenced. And Elias was about to uncover why. Stay tuned, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we begin, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. And honestly, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Leave your country in the comments below. The blizzard rolled over Montana like a white curtain swallowing the world. The wind howled against the rooftops of the small town, dragging snow in vicious spirals that scraped along the roads as if trying to peel them open. Inside his aging pickup truck, Elias Ward leaned forward over the steering wheel, squinting through the frost-bitten windshield as though willing the storm to break. At 45, Elias carried the kind of weight that did not bend his back, but hollowed the eyes of a muted gray, always searching for something he never said out loud. His face was lean and sharply cut, marked by a stubborn jawline and a scatter of rough, uneven stubble. Years of isolating himself in a cabin outside town had carved him into a man of quiet endurance, a man who rarely spoke unless he had to. His dark brown hair, grown longer than most men, kept it brushed the back of his neck and held streaks of silver that glinted like threads of unfinished regrets. He wore the same thing he always wore, an old dark brown leather coat with softened creases, a red and navy flannel shirt beneath it, jeans faded from time-winter boots, dusted in salt stains, and a gray wool scarf wrapped loosely at his throat, never quite protecting him, but never removed. Beside him sat Orion, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat and deep amber eyes that caught every flicker of movement outside the truck. Orion was large, powerful, and alert in a way only trained working dogs could be. Once a K-9 in a mountain rescue unit, he had become Elias's only companion after retirement. The dog's ears stood tall, quivering subtly, as if the wind itself whispered warnings into them. Elias shifted his grip on the folder, sitting on the passenger side floor, the presentation materials his niece Mira had forgotten that morning. Mira Ward, 18, sharp-minded and gentle, was in her first year of community college and interning as a teaching assistant in the local high school's science department. She was the only family left who spoke to him regularly, the last thread tying him to a world he had mostly stepped away from. He wasn't a man who volunteered sentiment, but returning the folder was a promise he refused to break. As he turned into the school parking lot, the storm thickened snow, slamming sideways into the truck with a howl. Orion suddenly stiffened, rising from his seated curl and planting his front paws against the dashboard. A low growl rolled out of him, not loud, but heavy, an instinctive warning from a creature who only growled when something was terribly wrong. "Easy," Elias murmured, though his pulse had already changed, tightening as if pulled by an invisible wire. Orion's gaze shot toward the courtyard behind the school, a place half hidden behind the gymnasium. Elias strained to see through the dense white veil of snow until a darker shape flickered at the edge of visibility. At first it looked like a heap of snow blown against the wall. Then it moved. His blood turned cold, not from the weather, but from the shape resolving before him into the unmistakable outline of a human body. Mira. The name left him like a breath he wasn't ready to lose. Elias shoved the truck door open. The wind slammed into him, cutting into his skin like shards of ice. He trudged through the thick snow boots, sinking deep. The closer he came, the worse the shape looked. Small collapsed, trembling. He dropped to his knees. It was her. Mira Ward, 18. Bright brown eyes now half shut, dark hair plastered to her cheeks, lips tinted an alarming blue. Her normally warm, beige-toned skin had drained to a cold, waxy pallor. She wore her usual light winter jacket and jeans clothing far from enough to survive the fury of a Montana blizzard. Mira. "Talk to me," Elias whispered, gathering her rigid shoulders into his arms. Her body jerked with involuntary tremors the kind cold brings when it starts sinking deeper than the skin. "Uncle." "El." Her voice was barely air, just a ghost of sound. Something inside him tightened, a familiar ache fear that reminded him of a night long ago when he had arrived too late to save someone else he loved. Not again. Elias lifted Mira from the ground, cradling her against his chest as the wind ripped at them. Orion circled close, whining sharply, pressing his warm flank against Elias's leg to guide him back. But just as Elias turned toward the school entrance, Orion froze. His ears snapped forward, body rigid gaze locked on the metal service door a few yards away. Elias followed the dog's stare. The wind paused for the briefest moment, long enough for him to hear it. Cash, the sound of a lock sliding into place, from the inside. Elias's breath caught in his throat. Someone had been there. Someone had watched. And someone had locked the door after leaving Mira outside. For a heartbeat, the world went completely silent, except for the storm raging around them. Elias lifted his gaze toward the small slit window high on the metal door. Snow blurred everything, but he could have sworn he knew someone had been standing there, watching him, watching Mira freeze. His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath the stubble. The grief buried in his chest hardened into something darker, something sharp and cold as the wind slicing across his face. Orion growled again, louder this time, his fur bristling along his spine. Elias shifted Mira's weight in his arms and tightened his hold protectively. "We're going inside," he muttered, though the words were more promise than statement. As he turned away from the locked door, one thought hammered through him like a pulse. Someone did this. And whoever it was had just made a mistake they would regret. The blizzard had softened by afternoon, leaving the sky bruised gray and the school hallways wrapped in a damp, lingering chill. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above Elias Ward as he strode through the main corridor, his boots leaving melting trails behind him. His leather coat, still speckled with snow, creaked softly with every movement. Elias's jaw was locked tight, the muscle along his cheek twitching with each step, a barely restrained storm brewing beneath his skin. His mind replayed the sound of that metal door locking from the inside, a detail sharper than the cold biting through Montana. Orion padded at his heel, tall and alert, the German shepherd's amber eyes scanning every doorway as if expecting the danger Eli felt pulsing in the walls. The school nurse's office sat tucked near the administrative wing, its muted yellow light spilling into the hallway. Inside, Mira Ward lay bundled on the narrow bed, wrapped in thermal blankets. Her breathing had steadied, though every now and then a tremor ripple crossed her frame, a remnant of the brutal cold she had survived. Her dark hair, damp and clinging to her forehead, framed a face usually bright with quiet intelligence, but now pale with exhaustion. Orion settled near her instantly, lowering his body so his warmth pressed against the side of the bed. Elias's chest tightened at the sight. He brushed a hand through Mira's hair, then turned toward the door as it opened. Principal Harold Grayson stepped in, a man in his mid-50s with a broad, stomach-thinning gray hair combed carefully back and glasses perched at the end of a narrow nose. His skin had a reddish hue, as though worry or embarrassment had become his natural state. He offered a strained smile, hands clasped together too tightly. "Mr. Ward. I'm relieved your niece is stable. This whole situation is terribly unfortunate." Elias's eyes narrowed. The principal's tone was soft, placating, but his posture was defensive, leaning back as though bracing for a blow. "Unfortunate." Elias' repeated voice low. "That's one word. I can think of others." Grayson swallowed. "We're doing everything we can. The teacher in charge today, well, she who was responsible." Elias cut in his deep voice, vibrating like distant thunder. "Name her." The principal adjusted his glasses, his gaze flicking briefly toward Orion, as if the dog might also demand an answer. "Veronica Hale. She's our substitute for the week. 32, came highly recommended." At the mention of her name, Orion's ears pinned back. A faint growl vibrated through his chest, a warning. Elias felt it like a cold spike between his ribs. Grayson cleared his throat. "She's in the faculty lounge. I've asked her to stay for questioning." Elias didn't wait for permission. He shoved the door open and walked out. Orion followed, nails clicking rhythmically against the tile. The principal hurried behind them, perspiration forming at his temples. The faculty lounge was warm with burnt coffee air and a humming vending machine. Inside, several young teaching assistants huddled together, whispering sharply. Their eyes widened when they saw Elias's imposing figure fill the doorway, his tall, rugged frame the shadows beneath his slate-gray eyes, the menace of controlled anger etched into his jawline. A woman stood slightly apart from the others. Veronica Hale. She was tall, maybe 5'8", with a slim figure encased in a tight navy blouse and black slacks. Her blonde hair was pulled into a severe high ponytail, so tight it sharpened her already angular face. Her cheekbones jutted sharply, and her icy blue eyes flickered with annoyance rather than concern. She looked like someone accustomed to judging others long before offering help. Veronica folded her arms. "Are you Mira Ward's uncle?" Her tone was clipped, dismissive, as if this were an inconvenience rather than a crisis. Elias studied her closely, the rigid posture, the defensive tilt of her chin, the faint tremor at the corner of her mouth that suggested she was not nearly as confident as she pretended. "I am," he said, "and I want to know why my niece was outside in a blizzard." Veronica scoffed, turning slightly as though shielding herself with indifference. "She was being disruptive, challenging my authority. Sometimes students need consequences." Elias took a step forward. The room tensed. The young assistants looked ready to bolt. Orion rose, hackles lifting subtly. "Consequences," Elias repeated slowly, "don't involve hypothermia." Veronica's jaw tightened. "I told her to think about her behavior. I didn't mean for her to stay out long. Teenagers exaggerate. She probably just wandered around instead of coming back in." A sharp gasp came from a nearby assistant, a young woman with curly brown hair and large, timid eyes, no older than 21. She stepped forward hesitantly. "That's not true," she whispered. "Mira wasn't disruptive at all. She just answered a question you asked." Veronica shot the girl a warning glare. The assistant flinched but continued, voice trembling. "Before class, you said, let's see who actually knows how to teach. We thought you were joking, but then Mira answered correctly and you got angry." Another assistant, a tall young man with freckles and nervous hands, nodded. "Yeah. You said she was showing off, and you told her to leave. We all thought you'd call her back in. You didn't." Veronica's face flushed a deep red, but her lips curled into something bitter. "I don't have to explain myself to interns. They don't understand classroom control." Elias stepped closer, voice low, as a blade sliding free. Explain it to me. Veronica stiffened, but lifted her chin. Maybe she needed humility. Orion erupted his growl loud enough to silence the entire room. Every muscle in the dog's body coiled, his amber gaze locked onto Veronica, as if he recognized something dark in her scent. Veronica stumbled back a step. "Control your dog. He's reacting to something," Elias said quietly. "Something familiar." Principal Grayson intervened shakily. "Mr. Ward, please, we'll conduct a formal investigation. This isn't an investigation." Elias's voice cut clean through the air. "This is me finding out who locked that door." The assistants exchanged uneasy glances. Veronica's facade cracked, fear flashed behind her eyes, then vanished as she forced her face into neutrality. Elias saw it anyway, that tiny fracture, that slip of truth trying to break through a lie. He leaned in his shadow, falling across her face. "Someone locked Mira outside," he murmured. "And my dog seems to think he knows who." Veronica's breathing hitched. Orion growled again, deeper this time. Elias faintly smelled the storm outside creeping into the room, the cold truth pushing against the heat of Veronica's lie. The principal cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Ward, perhaps we should reconvene in my office." Elias didn't respond right away. He kept his eyes on Veronica, studying the micro-expressions flickering across her face, the tightening of her jaw, the involuntary swallow, the signs of a person cornered by truth. Then slowly he stepped back. "We're not done," he said. Orion barked once, sharp and certain, as if confirming the promise. The storm had finally quieted by dawn, leaving a pale, washed-out sky stretching over the town like a sheet pulled too tight. Frost clung to every surface windows, cars' railings caught in the soft glow of early morning light. Elias Ward walked down the empty school hallway, his boots echoing faintly in the silence. His leather coat, still cold from the night before, weighed on his shoulders like a reminder of everything he had yet to uncover. Orion trotted beside him, the 6-year-old German shepherd, moving with tense, deliberate energy. His ears flicked at every sound, every shift in the air, as though the building's quiet breathing spoke secrets only he could hear. Elias's thoughts churned beneath the steady facade he wore. Veronica Hale's face, so controlled, so cold, kept flashing before him, along with the memory of Orion's visceral reaction to her name. Dogs didn't growl at nothing. Not trained dogs. Not dogs who had once worked search and rescue missions in mountains, where lies froze faster than bodies. A person's scent revealed the truth, long before their voice ever did. Elias reached the administrative office where a soft-faced clerk in her 40s handed him a thin folder. Her sandy brown hair fell in quiet waves past her shoulders, and her expression was gentle yet cautious, as though used to mediating conflicts she didn't fully understand. "This is Veronica Hale's personnel file," she said. "It's all we have." Elias nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated before adding, "Be careful. People who look clean on paper aren't always clean in life." Elias appreciated the warning more than he let show. He took the folder into a small conference room where Orion immediately lay near the door, vigilant. Elias opened the file and frowned. It was perfect. Too perfect. Every review rated Veronica as exceptional. No disciplinary notes, no performance complaints, not a single mark of friction from any school she ever substituted for. A career spotless enough to gleam. Elias felt something cold twist inside him, not the weather but instinct. Instinct honed from the time he volunteered in mountain rescue operations years ago, where he learned the truth about clean records. The cleaner they looked, the more someone had scrubbed them. He closed the folder slowly. Someone wiped this. Orion let out a soft, questioning chuff as if agreeing. A knock tapped on the door before a young man entered, no older than 23. He wore a bulky security jacket, the patch slightly crooked on the sleeve. His brown hair was cut short, and his face, round, earnest, dotted with acne scars, immediately gave away his nerves. "Mr. Ward," he said softly. "I'm Dylan Reeves, the night shift security officer." Elias studied him carefully. The young man fidgeted, twisting a key ring around his finger. "You said you had something to tell me?" Dylan swallowed and nodded. I didn't know if it mattered, but I saw someone with Ms. Hale a couple days ago. Pretty early." Elias straightened. "When about 6 in the morning, 2 days back. She was in the parking lot, arguing with some guy." Dylan hesitated. "I hadn't seen him before. He wasn't a teacher. Describe him." Dylan scrunched his brows. "Tall, maybe 6'2". Lean but tough-looking. Brown hair kinda messy. Stubble on his jaw. He had this intense stare. The kind that sticks in your head even if you don't want it to." Elias's heartbeat shifted. "Anything else?" Dylan nodded slowly. He had a tattoo on the side of his neck. A snake coiled around a broken chain. Elias froze. Orion lifted his head sharply, ears pricked forward. That tattoo, that symbol, that ghost from the past. Elias opened his phone and pulled up an old file he hadn't looked at in years, one he kept only because some nightmares demanded to be remembered. He slid the image across the table and turned it toward Dylan. "Was it him?" Dylan stared, eyes widening. "Yes. That's the guy. Jonas Hale. Veronica's older brother, the man who'd once been investigated for trafficking but slipped through every legal net. A man Shadow, the rescue dog Elias had worked with before Orion once cornered but lost in a storm. And if Jonas was here, if he had met Veronica behind the school, then this was no longer about ego or classroom authority. It was something deliberate, something dangerous. Elias knelt beside Orion, lowering the phone so the dog could see the picture. "Orion," he murmured. "Do you remember him?" Orion sniffed the phone, his muscles tensing. Then he growled a deep, visceral rumble that vibrated through the room, the kind of sound a dog made when recognizing a predator. Elias felt it reverberate through his ribs. Dylan stepped back instinctively. "Is he dangerous?" "Yes," Elias said simply. Mira's soft footsteps approached before anyone else could speak. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in a fresh winter coat borrowed from the nurse. Her hair was tied loosely, still damp from melted snow. Her brown eyes, usually warm, held fear beneath the surface like a trembling reflection. "Uncle Elias?" Her voice quivered, but she forced her shoulders straight. "I remember something." Elias rose gently, guiding her to a chair. "Tell me." Mira took a deep breath. "The day before, when I arrived early, I saw Ms. Hale behind the school. She wasn't alone." Dylan's eyes widened. Elias leaned in. "Who did you see?" Mira's fingers twisted nervously. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, I just froze when I heard them arguing." She lowered her gaze. "And I saw him." Elias's pulse hammered. The man from the photo, Mira nodded. He handed her something, a small black pouch. She hid it in her coat pocket like she didn't want anyone to see. Elias exchanged a look with Orion, whose growl had softened into a steady vigilance. Mira continued, voice now faint. "When she saw me, I think she panicked. She asked what I heard. I told her nothing, but she stared at me like she didn't believe me." Her breath trembled. "I thought she was just being rude. I didn't think she'd punish me for it." Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder, though inside him, a wildfire of rage and dread ignited. Mira had become part of something she wasn't meant to witness, something darker than a teacher's pride. Veronica hadn't been angry because Mira answered a question. She had been afraid. Afraid Mira saw something she wasn't supposed to see, something Jonas Hale had given her. Elias closed the folder with a quiet, controlled motion. "This isn't about discipline," he said, his voice low and steady. "Someone wants to hide something." And Mira got too close. Orion barked once sharp and knowing because he too scented the truth lurking beneath Veronica Hale's perfect surface. The truth had claws. And it had already reached for Mira once. The night settled over Montana like a heavy cloth, dulling the edges of the world beneath a thick veil of frost. The moon, half hidden behind racing clouds, cast a pale silver wash across the frozen plains stretching beyond the town. Elias Ward stood outside the school's back entrance, his breath spilling into the darkness in white bursts. The cold bit sharply at his cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the fire churning beneath his ribs, a restless rising dread that no winter wind could silence. Veronica Hale had vanished. Completely. The police had arrived within the hour, only to discover her phone powered off her home, abandoned her car missing, and every trace of her departure scrubbed clean, except for one thing, a grainy security camera clip, showing her slipping into a black SUV with no license plate. And Elias knew exactly whose vehicle that was. Orion walked beside him, paws crunching softly in the snow. The German shepherd's posture had shifted into something sharper, more primal ears, erect gaze, unblinking breath, steady and low. Elias recognized the transformation. Orion wasn't simply alert. He was tracking, following a scent he knew too well. Elias tightened his scarf, the gray wool brushing against the rough stubble along his jaw. His mind kept circling the same grim truth: Veronica had not acted alone. Mira was trembling upstairs in the nurse's office earlier, insisting she saw Jonas Hale at the school. Jonas, who should have been hundreds of miles away, hiding from the crimes he barely escaped. Jonas, whose gaze, even in photographs, carried the same feral cunning that haunted Elias from the rescue mission years ago. Elias still remembered the night he and Shadow had almost cornered him in a burned-out cabin in the mountains. Jonas had slipped into a ravine, and Shadow's furious barking had followed him into the dark. Now Jonas was back, and Mira had witnessed something she should never have seen. Orion pressed forward, suddenly pulling Elias out of memory. The dog lowered his head, sniffed the ground, then trotted toward the chain-link fence at the edge of the parking lot. Elias followed. Orion nudged through a gap in the fence just large enough for someone determined to squeeze through, and bounded down a narrow, snow-covered trail leading toward the outskirts of town. The walk was long, winding through skeletal trees and silent fields where the snow glowed faintly under the moon. Elias's boots sank deep. His breath grew heavier. But Orion never slowed, guided by the unmistakable certainty of instinct. Finally, the trail opened to a clearing. There it stood, an old storage warehouse abandoned long enough for the paint to peel from its corrugated metal walls. Elias felt a chill crawl up his spine, unrelated to the cold. Jonas Hale had used this place as a hideout years ago, and now it seemed he had returned. Orion growled softly at the door. Elias unholstered the flashlight he kept in his coat and pushed the creaking door open. The air inside was stale, carrying hints of dust, rust, and something fouler, a scent of lingering danger. Orion strode forward, nose to the ground, tail straight, body tense. The beam of the flashlight sliced through the darkness, landing on a large corkboard mounted against the far wall. Elias's stomach knotted. The board was covered with a map of the town, dots marking the school, the back courtyard, the parking lot Mira had mentioned. Around it were sticky notes, scrawled in a rushed, bold handwriting. Mira's name appeared on several, Next to it, circled in red, were the words she saw. On a metal table lay a roll of duct tape, plastic zip ties, and a collection of printed photos, one of them showing a missing girl from a case 2 counties over. Elias felt his pulse hammer in his ears. They were planning something. Something far bigger than punishing Mira. Orion suddenly stopped beside a pile of crates. He nudged something with his nose. Elias lowered the flashlight. His breath stuttered. It was a torn winter jacket. Mira's jacket. The one she wasn't wearing when he found her. Someone had stuffed it beneath the crates, as though attempting to plant evidence that might frame Mira for a crime she had nothing to do with. Elias's face hardened, a shadow crossing his gray eyes. They were trying to make Mira disappear, not by killing her outright, but by burying her beneath lies. The rustle of gravel cut through the silence. Orion's ears shot up. His growl rumbled hot and violent through the dark. Elias's hand moved instinctively to his belt, fingers curling around the small tactical knife he always carried. Footsteps approached from the warehouse entrance. 2 silhouettes emerged from the shadows. The first was unmistakable. Jonas Hale, tall, lean, with a face carved from arrogance and cruelty. His brown hair was wild, his jaw dusted with uneven stubble, and the serpent tattoo curled around his neck looked alive under the dim light. His eyes gleamed with the cold satisfaction of someone who believed he was still untouchable. Beside him stood a heavier man, broad shoulders, thick arms, close-shaved head. His face was coarse, scarred across the cheek, and his dark eyes held the indifferent emptiness of someone who had long ago discarded conscience. Jonas smirked. Well, he drawled, looks like the uncle came sniffing around. Elias said nothing. He stood still, calculating, watching every movement, every breath. Jonas clicked his tongue. Your niece, she's too smart for her own good. Girl remembers faces. Details. Things she shouldn't. He stepped forward, boots crunching softly against the cement floor. And I can't let her live to tell anyone she saw me. Orion exploded into a fierce snarl, the kind that came from deep instinct, from primal recognition of a predator threatening the pack. Elias felt it vibrate through the warehouse. Jonas's partner cracked his knuckles. Jonas grinned wider. Get ready, Mutt, he said. This time you won't be interfering. Orion didn't wait for another word. He lunged, no hesitation. No warning, the unleashed fury of a dog who understood exactly what was at stake. Moonlight spilled weakly across the frozen clearing, silvering the snow, as the storm slowed to a cold, exhausted whisper. The wind carried long, mournful notes through the broken panels of the warehouse, as if the night itself were holding its breath. Elias Ward stood tensely in that pale glow, his worn leather coat whipping against his legs, every muscle burning with the knowledge that this moment, this single sliver of time, would determine whether Mira lived to see another dawn. His breath rose in ragged clouds. Years of isolation had worn him down, chiseling away at his former strength. But beneath the scar tissue of solitude and regret, something fierce still lived, a promise formed long ago when Mira was placed in his arms for the very first time. She was family, his only anchor. No storm, no criminal, no darkness would take her from him. Jonas Hale lunged first. The thin moonlight caught the knife in his hand, a long, jagged-edged hunting blade, its steel glinting like a shard of winter. Jonas's face, gaunt and sharp with malice, twisted into a snarl as he closed the distance with feral speed. His brown hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, despite the cold, and his eyes held the unhinged determination of a man who believed he had nothing left to lose. Orion intercepted him in a blur of muscle and instinct. The 6-year-old German shepherd launched himself at Jonas's arm jaws, clamping down with a bone-deep growl. Jonas staggered, cursing, slamming the dog against a crate, trying to wrench his hand free. Orion didn't let go. Elias charged at the second man, the heavy brute who'd followed Jonas out of the darkness. The man towered over Elias, thick neck bulging beneath a black jacket, fists like mallets ready to crush bone. His shaved head gleamed under the warehouse's dim light, and a faded scar cut across his cheek, hinting at a lifetime of brawls. He swung first. The blow caught Elias across the jaw, snapping his head to the side, sending a burst of white pain through his skull. Elias tasted iron. His boots slid on the icy floor, but he steadied himself, grit anchoring him more firmly than any stance. He struck back his fist, driving into the man's ribs with a dull, resonant thud. Pain lanced through his knuckles, but he didn't stop. The man grunted, taking the hit like a slab of stone, then grabbed Elias by the collar and hurled him backward. Elias crashed into a metal shelf, the breath knocked from his lungs. His vision blurred, but through the haze he saw Mira, a thin silhouette near the far wall, eyes-wide body trembling beneath the oversized jacket he'd wrapped around her earlier. Her dark hair clung damply to her cheeks, and her young face, usually bright with determination, was pale with fear. She whispered, "Uncle Elias." And something inside him snapped back into focus. Not strength, not skill, purpose. He pushed off the shelf and lunged again, tackling the brute around the waist. They slid across the snowy concrete, fists flying, grunts echoing through the cold. The man's strength was monstrous, but Elias fought with the desperation of someone who had already lost too much in life and refused to lose again. He slammed his elbow into the brute's throat. The man gagged, loosened his grip. Elias drove his knee upward into the man's solar plexus. The brute folded air rushing from him in a choked gasp, and Elias struck once more, knocking him flat. Behind him, Jonas finally ripped his arm free of Orion's bite. The dog skidded across the floor, hitting a crate with a hard thump. Mira screamed. Jonas spun toward her, murder in his eyes. "You should have kept your mouth shut," he hissed. Mira backed away, boots slipping on the thin sheet of ice forming beneath the broken roof panels. Her breath came out in terrified bursts, but even trembling, she kept her gaze locked on Jonas, refusing to look away. Jonas lunged. Orion recovered first. He surged forward, planting himself between Jonas and Mira just in time. Jonas's boot connected with Orion's ribs hard. The crack echoed. Orion yelped but didn't fall, didn't retreat. His golden eyes locked onto Jonas with a fire Elias had only seen once before the night Orion lost his former partner, Shadow. The memory of that failure lived in him like a scar. Tonight, he would not fail again. Jonas swung again, knife raised. Orion leapt, teeth bared, catching Jonas's forearm before the blade could reach Mira. Jonas screamed, stumbling backward into a stack of rusted barrels. Elias, seeing the opening, grabbed a fallen metal pipe and swung with all the strength his weary body could muster. The pipe connected with Jonas's shoulder, sending him sprawling into the snow outside the broken doorway. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance, the police drawn by Elias's earlier call. The brute beside him groaned, trying to rise. Elias planted a knee between the man's shoulders and pressed him back down firmly until he stopped struggling. Officers burst onto the scene. Moments later, guns raised, boots thundering across the frozen ground. Jonas scrambled to his feet, but 3 officers pinned him down within seconds, wrenching the knife from his hand. A 4th officer pulled open the door of the black SUV nearby. Veronica Hale emerged, wrists bound, face drained of color. Her blonde hair, usually tied in a crisp, high ponytail, hung loose and tangled around her angular face. Her amber eyes flicked nervously between Jonas and Elias, but the cold emptiness in them suggested she wasn't sorry, only afraid, now that her plan had unraveled. I didn't mean she began weakly, but the officers ignored her. Mira rushed to Orion, dropping to her knees in the snow. She wrapped her arms around his neck, tears slipping down her cheeks. Orion trembled, breath hitching in pain, but he lifted his head and nudged her shoulder, eyes warm, gentle, proud. Elias approached, chest tight. Orion held his gaze for a long moment, asking a question without a single word. "Did we protect her? Did we do enough?" Elias knelt beside them, resting a trembling hand on Orion's back. "Yes," he whispered, voice breaking. "We did." Hours later, after statements were given and criminals taken away, Elias drove Mira and Orion home. The morning sun melted the last of the storm, turning the snow on the windowpane into glittering droplets. Elias sat by the window watching them fall, his gray eyes reflecting exhaustion, relief, and something he had not felt in years, hope. Mira healed quickly, her bright spirit undimmed. Orion's injury was mild, and within days he was walking proudly again, the whole community praising him as their four-legged hero. As Elias watched the two of them laugh together in the kitchen, Mira offering Orion treats he clearly didn't need, he understood something profound. Some storms were meant to break you. Others were meant to reveal the light waiting on the other side. And sometimes it came from a brave young girl and a loyal dog who would walk through fire to keep her safe. In the quiet after every storm, there's a moment when we finally see the miracles we missed while fighting to survive. Some say it's luck, but others know it's the soft hand of God guiding us through the darkness, sending us protectors in the form of loyal dogs, brave souls, and the love we often take for granted. As you go back to your everyday life, may His light guard your steps and bless your home. If this story touched your heart, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe. May God watch over every viewer who listens tonight.